Hello and welcome to a new edition of Africa Today. In this edition of our program, we will talk about a variety of topics related to the African continent. But our main topic today will be the visit by President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi to the Omani capital, as President el-Sisi left the Omani capital for Bahrain on Tuesday. Earlier, President el-Sisi had met Sultan Haytham bin Tariq Al Said of Oman in Alam Al Ammar Palace in the capital, Muscat. Presidential spokesperson Bassem Raji said that President el-Sisi and Sultan Haytham held private talks during which President el-Sisi praised the level of coordination between the two sides and unified vision over issues of mutual concern. Raji said President el-Sisi also expressed appreciation for sharing viewpoints over efforts to keep maritime security in the Arabian Gulf and the Red Sea, fighting terrorist organizations. For his part, the Omani Sultan praised Cairo's role in boosting joint Arab action mechanism before crises and challenges facing the region. Raji said the meeting discussed means of boosting bilateral ties between the two sides, especially in trade, economic and investment fields. He said a number of international issues of mutual concern, especially the Russia-Ukraine crisis and its repercussions on the region, also topped the agenda of the talks. And to shed more light on the importance of this visit by President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi to Oman, we are joined over the phone by Ambassador Hussein Haridi, former Assistant Foreign Minister. Good afternoon, Mr. Ambassador.
Good afternoon, Madam.
So, sir, how do you see the timing of the visit and its importance?
Well, I guess this tour that President el-Sisi is making in the Gulf yesterday and today, he comes to conclude a series of summits between President Sisi and Gulf and Arab leaders. For the last 7 or 8 days, President Sisi met in various summits with the King of Bahrain, then organized a tripartite summit that brought together President el-Sisi, the Jordanian king, and the Bahraini king in Sharm el-Sheikh. That was followed by a visit by His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, to Cairo, and then a visit, an official visit at the invitation of President Sisi of His Royal Highness Emir Tamim of Qatar. So when I analyze the tour of President Sisi in the Gulf these days, that's the context, the larger context in which I looked at it. Of course, all these summits and the tour have various objectives. Aside from the bilateral questions that have been raised in all these summits and the tour, I guess elaborating a common Arab position vis-a-vis various challenges and problems and threats to Arab countries, I guess, were high on the agenda of the summits and in this tour.
Sir, in your opinion, why is Cairo keen on developing economic ties with Oman, and what is the potential of cooperation between the two countries?
Well, I guess, of course, the Gulf investments and Arab investments in the Egyptian economy, they date back to decades. But lately, the importance of increasing that volume of investment has taken center stage in the policy of the Egyptian government. And on the other hand, the surplus funds at the disposal of the oil-producing and gas-producing Gulf countries have encouraged them to look into investment opportunities in Egypt when the Egyptian government is undertaking an ambitious economic reform program and is privatizing some of the public sector companies. And in fact, Gulf investors, particularly Saudis and Qataris, have shown increasing interest in looking into investment opportunities in Egypt.
Yes, Mr. Ambassador's discussions in Oman also highlighted maritime security in the Arabian Gulf and the Red Sea, as well as fighting terrorist organizations. Can you elaborate on this, and how can the two countries cooperate to fight terrorism?
Well, as you may know, Madam, the Oman has played a significant role in international Arab and Gulf attempts to bring the war in Yemen to a peaceful solution. Of course, insecurity and instability in Yemen, which about the Bab el-Mandab Strait, of course, is a major threat to the security of the Red Sea. And speaking of the Red Sea, of course, comes to mind the shipping lane in the Suez Canal. So working with the Omani government and other Gulf governments like Saudi Arabia to stabilize the situation in Yemen has been a strategic priority for Egypt because it is directly linked to security of the sea lanes through Bab el-Mandab Strait, the Red Sea, and the Suez Canal. As of fighting terrorism, I guess we are cooperating not only with Oman, but we are cooperating with our partners, Arab allies, and other powers, international powers, to defeat terrorism in the Arab world.
So, sir, also a number of international issues of mutual concern, especially Russia-Ukraine crisis and its repercussions on the region, topped the agenda of the talks. So how is the Russia-Ukraine crisis impact the security of the Arab region?
Well, of course, I believe that, I think that discussing the Ukrainian war in these summits and the present tour of President Sisi has come in the context of a growing Arab interest of stopping the escalation in Ukraine and in working for a diplomatic solution to the differences between Russia and Ukraine. Because, of course, the Arab countries, including Egypt, of course, have of course, borne the brunt of the negative consequences of this war on the food, on the food security and on energy prices, which contributed to growing inflation rates across the world, which, of course, has had a direct impact on Egypt and other Arab countries. So I believe, Madam, that Arab countries are interested in working with the United Nations and the international community of bringing this war to an end without getting involved in the polarization around this war between the West and Russia. Having said that, of course, food security in the Arab world has been threatened and inflation rates have increased due to the increase in oil prices. And of course, Egypt and the Gulf countries are cooperating in dealing with the outcome of this war in these two particular spheres.
Yes, I'd like to thank you, Ambassador Hussein Haridi, former Assistant Foreign Minister. Thank you, sir, for being with us. And back to our news and reports from the African continent, Cairo. And the UN Drugs and Crime Office met over boosting cooperation to meet global challenges. During the meeting, the Egyptian side lauded the UN's effort to support priorities of Africa, which include combating drugs and organized crime, affirming Cairo's support for these efforts that strengthen the pillars of security and stability in the continent. Details follow. And sorry for this technical problem. And back to the reports from the African continent. And Ethiopia denied Sudan's accusation. It executed Sudanese soldiers, and the civilian skirmishes between the neighboring countries have erupted in recent years over the contested and fertile Al Fashqa border region. Details follow.
The Ministry of Transportation and the Executive Director of the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, UNODC, Ghada Wali, discussed frameworks of cooperation to meet the current global challenges in many fields. During the meeting, Wali reviewed the UNODC's efforts to halt organized cross-border drug trafficking through various land, sea, and maritime outlets in cooperation between the Border Control Branch of the Vienna-based office and the UNODC Regional Office for the Middle East and North Africa in Cairo. Wali also referred to a number of UNODC major projects in this regard. At the top of them is the UNODC WCO Container Control Program CCP, a joint initiative between the UNODC and the World Customs Organization WCO to ban illicit trafficking of drugs and other goods, facilitate legal trading, and safeguard border revenues. For his part, Al-Wazir stressed the necessity of balancing between maintaining the flow of international trade and expanding the scope of vigilance to control smuggling operations across land and maritime ports. The two sides then agreed that the UNDOC would support Cairo's transportation sector within the context of its mandate. Last week, Wali held a meeting with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in which they tackled means to boost cooperation between Egypt and the UNODC in the coming period. The ministry asserted keenness to continue the fruitful cooperation between the two sides in combating transnational organized crime, corruption, illegal trafficking of cultural property, and supporting national capabilities in the areas of priority to the Egyptian state. It also lauded the UNODC's effort to support the priorities of Africa, which include combating drugs and organized crime, affirming Egypt's support for these efforts that strengthen the pillars of security and stability in the African continent.
And that was a report on Cairo and the UN Drugs and the Crime Office as they met over boosting cooperation to meet global challenges. And back to our reports. And Ethiopia denied Sudan's accusation. It executed Sudanese soldiers, and civilian details follow.
Ethiopia on Monday denied Sudan's accusation that its army had captured and executed 7 Sudanese soldiers and a civilian, instead blaming the killings on a local militia. Skirmishes between the neighboring countries have erupted in recent years over the contested and fertile Al Fashqa border region. Sudan's foreign ministry said on Monday the men had been seized on Sudanese territory on June 22 and taken into Ethiopia, where they were killed. In a statement Monday, Ethiopia's foreign ministry said the facts of the incident were misrepresented and that the deaths were a result of a skirmish between Sudanese soldiers who they said had staged an incursion into Ethiopian land and a local militia. It said the incident would be investigated. Accusing Ethiopia of displaying the bodies in public, Sudan's foreign ministry said it was summoning the Ethiopian ambassador in Khartoum and calling its own ambassador back from Addis Ababa for discussions. Sudanese government sources said late on Monday that Sudan had filed a formal complaint with the Security Council. Following a visit to the area, Sudan's military leader, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, said the response would be felt on the ground and that no new movements to trespass into Sudanese land would be allowed. The Ethiopian statement said the Ethiopian government hopes that the Sudanese government would restrain itself from any escalation of the incident and would take measures that could de-escalate the situation.
And the Libya's national oil company said it is considering declaring state of force majeure in the next 72 hours if oil production and exports do not resume at the Gulf of Sirte terminals due to an oil blockade. Details follow.
The Libyan National Oil Company, NOC, on Monday warned to declare a force majeure on its facilities in the northern Gulf of Sirte within 72 hours, as it is unable to meet its contractual obligations due to their forced closure. NOC boss Mustafa Sanallah warned in a statement, quote, that is considering declaring a state of force majeure in the next 72 hours if oil production and exports do not resume at the Gulf of Sirte terminals. End quote. He called on all parties to work for the reopening of the oil fields and the resumption of exports. The company said invoking a state of force majeure allows the company to be released from its contractual obligations while exonerating it from any responsibility for its non-performance. Plunged into chaos since the fall of Muammar Gaddafi's regime in 2011 and plagued by divisions between the east and west of the country, Libya, endowed with the most abundant reserves in Africa, is in the grip of a serious institutional crisis. Two governments have been fighting for power since March, one based in Tripoli and led by Abdelhamid Biba since 2021, and another led by Fathi Bashara and supported by the camp of Marshal Khalifa Haftar, the strongman of the east. Despite the country's oil wealth, Libyans face a dozen hours of power cuts a day, while the temperature hovers around 40 degrees.
Well, dear viewers, that's all for today's edition of Africa Today. Thank you for watching.